And now I've talked about it too much, so let's get to Iran. Team 2, the Persians. Team Persia, Team Iran, I don't care what you call it. How do we identify them? It is a group of folks, Persian, the ethnicity of Iran, most Iranian people from that particular part of the planet, and they've been hanging out there for like 3,000 or 4,000 freaking years. Just like the Arabs are from Saudi Arabia, Persians are primarily core from Iran, and they are overwhelmingly Shia Islam. I tried to state this as clearly as possible as I could in class last Monday. It's really not that Shias and Sunnis on religious, dogmatic, or ideological differences have this big dispute. It really simply is a matter of that it just kind of helps define the teams better. There have been virtually no circumstances historically where Sunnis went out and slaughtered Shias or Shias went out and slaughtered Sunnis simply because they were on this other religious team. By the way, for you hardcore historians, it actually has happened like once or twice. But in the last 1,500 years, once or twice ain't much. And what I want you to get is, it's not the reason why these two teams don't like each other. It just helps further define the teams. It's mostly about the two different groups of people. It just so happens that reinforcing that difference is that Arabs are mostly Sunni, Persians are mostly Shia. So you got the ethnically Persian, religiously Shia. Iran is the power core. However, they do have something I'm calling the crescent, which has been growing fast. The Shia crescent, we refer to it now as. Now, before we even get to the Shia crescent in today's world, dig this. The Arab Islamic Empire got really big and then, like I said, kind of at its height, 800, 900, 1000 AD. But before there was an Arab Islamic Empire, there actually was a Persian Empire. Yeah, it's not just a rug. It's an actual culture that was in the classic world. Way classic. Like, the time of ancient Greece and the battles of Troy, the Trojan Wars, and all that stuff. And Alexander the Great and those great Greek Hellenistic characters. Even though Alexander the Great was Macedonian. Side note to self. But at that time, Persia were the total ass kickers of the Middle East. Total. Total-y. These guys were the empire to beat, and they had a ginormous empire. And we're talking now in BC times. We're talking 700, 600, 500 BC or BCE, whatever one you like to say. And they, again, from the core of Iran, but at their height, it swept over and had control over what's now Afghanistan, Pakistan, parts of India, but also over all the way into Egypt, across the kind of fertile crescent of the classic Middle East. It controlled all of what's now Turkey. And indeed, we're knocking down the doors of the ancient Greek stuff I was just talking about. We, of course, in Western civilization only read about all that great, ancient stuff that applies to Western civilization, and ancient Persia is largely forgotten. Why? Because it's not Western enough, I guess. I don't know. However, these guys were so powerful. They're the reason that Alexander the Great, actually a bunch of Greek armies before them, had to face off against the Iranians. Well, they weren't the Iranians then. They were face off against the Persians. And I know you're like, why does he teach us all this ancient history? I don't know none of this. I ain't going to remember none of it. Yeah, you will, because you saw a movie, I'll bet, that referenced this exact face-off between Western and Eastern culture, or Western and Middle Eastern culture, 2,500 years ago, and that is the 300. Yeah, that's right. At the height of its empire, apparently the Persians had some crazy-looking dude that had earrings and nose rings and face rings and rode elephants and had ninjas fighting for him. I'm making all this up, of course. I'm not sure that the 300 is quite that historically accurate, although the battle that they depict in the 300 is historically accurate. That actually did happen because the Persian army was so badass and so awesome, it was permeating into classic Greece and what we'd call Europe in today's world. Thank God Leonidas came in to save the day. Now, that was at its peak, okay, at its height, and that was a long time ago. And then Alexander the Great and these other dudes, after Leonidas, came and beat the living hell out of the Persians and killed Darius, the major king, and wiped them out. Again, that's old school, that's old days. However, do dig this. The modern day state of Iran is still, was then, is now still the core of this ethnicity, core of this culture that has a very long and very proud tradition and history, again, dating back to a period that they controlled all of the Middle East, and that's not something they have ever forgotten. Not up to this day, not ever. That is why the Persians, Team Iran, is a major contender for power across this entire region. Being not Arab, and then again, additionally, not Sunni, does set them apart a little bit from everybody else. And we perhaps are seeing what I call a re-rise of the Iranian Empire, re-rise of the Persian Empire, if you like, but very subtly. Oh, so subtly, by the way. Because in the old days, and even in the new days, if you're going to take over area, you think, oh, I'm going to physically send in my armies and take over this land or push out this way or eliminate my foes. Iran is gaining a lot of influence and a lot of power across the Middle East very, very quickly. However, they're not doing it openly. They're not doing it by going and aggressively taking over some other place. They're not sending out armies to take over anything. It's actually a war of proxies is what we call it. And they're expanding their influence and their power and their way of life and the way they see things covertly in this thing that's now forming up called the Shia Crescent. I'm going to say it for the 50th time. It's not that they're Shia and the Shias want to go kill all the Sunnis. It's just a nice way to define the different teams here. Because there are folks that are Shia who are not in Iran. And they have a natural inclination, as Iran is getting more powerful and has a lot of money to throw around and is a lot of influence to throw around, there's a natural inclination for some Shia people who are not from Iran, who are not Persian, to accept money or influence from Team Persia. And therefore, they're kind of allowing Iran to use them for a greater goal of influencing things in the region. I know maybe I'm talking in circles here when I should be talking in a crescent. So I'll just show you the map here. The Shia Crescent, as we define it, is areas that have a sizable, if not pretty big, Shia minority in them. And Iran, of course, is 90% Shia. But look how far afield you can go in the Middle East to find lots of other Shia folks that might be inclined to side up with Iran on any sort of economic or political issue. And I'll start up at the top of the crescent with Lebanon, 55% Shia. Wow, that's over half. That's over half of folks. They're not Iranian. They're not Persian. They're Lebanese. In fact, most of those Shias in Lebanon are probably Arab. But they're also Shia, not Sunni. So over half the people in Lebanon are Shia, 20% in Syria. And we also talked about how the leadership of Syria, they follow a subsect of Shia called Alawite. Bashar al-Assad and the royal family / dictators of Syria, they're all kind of in the Shia camp as well. Iraq has 63% Shia. Hello. They're a democracy now, so who's in charge of the government of Iraq? That'd be Shia, folks. Azerbaijan, 80% Shia. Look down to the Gulf states. Qatar with 15%. UAE with 16%. Bahrain with 20%. Yemen with 45%. Close to half the folks in Yemen are Shia. It's one of the reasons why there's been a political divide within Yemen. They've been in a semi-state of civil war for 10 years now because of these two different groups of people. Again, the whole argument here is that Iran is creating what we call an empire of proxies. That is, that they are not going out physically and taking over Iraq. They're not going and taking over Lebanon. They don't got to. They're using the people that they have some sort of natural religious affiliation with and funding them to perhaps promote greater Iranian goals. of maybe overthrowing a state that the Iranians don't like, or maybe just causing trouble somewhere where the Iranians want to cause trouble. And I'm going to point out a few specific ones that I definitely want you to know for the flash quiz and the final exam. And that is, you have groups like Hezbollah, something I've referenced in class many times, in Lebanon, a political/terrorist group, depending on who you are and how you want to define them, that's in Lebanon, in southern Lebanon, whose one of their stated goals is to destroy the state of Israel, and that's something that Iran really digs. So Iran funds Hezbollah. Money and guns float through, where'd we say? Syria, a country that is mostly Arab Sunni, but the leadership is Shia, and that would be al-Assad, who the Arab League just kicked out of the Arab League and said, we don't like this guy because he's too friendly with Iran. Is it all starting to come around? Are you starting to see it now? That they are like, no, we don't like this guy. He's been too good of buddies. Him and his daddy were too good of buddies with the Iranians, and that may be true. And the leadership of Syria, being Shia, have this natural inclination to allow Iran to move money and guns across their territory to go fund Hezbollah over in Lebanon. And actually, they do trade and lots of other things with between Syria and Iran, too. I'm not suggesting this is the only thing they do. No. It's that the Syrians have kind of used that Iranian influence and that Iranian money to get kind of things that they want to. The Syrians want to influence and have power over in Lebanon. They used to have a lot more. So you see the whole kind of network being set up here. Now, when you go down south, I don't know how much more the argument really pans out. Many Arab leaders want to say that Iran is influencing Shia populations all throughout the Gulf. So I point this out in particular because we, during this Arab Spring thing, you had a whole bunch of folks in Bahrain, which actually, I think that 20% number is wrong. Somebody Google that for me. I think it's more like 80%. I think I've got it backwards. I believe it's Bahrain is where they had a little Arab Spring uprising because the vast majority of folks in the country are actually Shia. And they feel like that they have been picked on by the Sunni government that runs Bahrain. And even though all of them are Arab, or most of them are, there is this is where it starts to get tricky, that it's kind of a religious split. And so, but not really that much of a religious split, but the Shiite folks are kind of the poorer classes in Bahrain, and so they were the ones taken to the streets to maybe overthrow the Sunni government, and Saudi Arabia came in and said, oh, hell no, we're going to go help our Arab brothers in Bahrain and crush that. And the Saudi Arabians, particularly, I'm pretty sure it was King Abdullah himself, said, this is all Iran's fault. Iran sent money in, sent protesters in, got people rattled up in Bahrain, all these Shias, they got all rattled up to try to overthrow the Arab Sunni government of Bahrain. Is this, I'm talking fast and I keep throwing terms back and forth, but are you starting to get what I'm talking about here? The Arab leaders, many of them, really see the evil hand of Iran in anything going on in the Arab Spring, but particularly in those Gulf states. Any sort of friction or any sort of protest that crops up, the Arab folks want to see that as, that's Iran's work, just like they're doing over there in Syria, just like they're doing over in Lebanon with Hezbollah. Get it? Got it? Okay, good. Let's go on there. The other group that is said to be taking money from Iran, even though they're not Shia, I don't believe at all, is this group called Hamas in the Gaza Strip. And Hamas is a political group / terrorist group, depending on who you ask, who does not like Israel, and so tries to throw bombs and rockets at Israel. And there is this illusion that Iran also funds them as well to stir up trouble and cause trouble with Israel. I'm sorry, did I say Iran gives money and perhaps guns to Hamas to stir up trouble in Israel? So basically, it's like a two-pronged thing. Folks assume that Iran is funding both Hezbollah in the north and Hamas in the south to cause trouble over in Israel. Because, of course, the leadership of Iran is semi-crazy, and they've said Israel doesn't deserve to exist and should be wiped off the face of the map and blah, 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 and the Jewish Holocaust didn't happen. All sorts of whack, crazy shit that I'll get to in just a minute. So you have Hezbollah in Lebanon, maybe supplied by Iran. Hamas in Gaza Strip, possibly supplied by Iran. Syria is the conduit, we already talked about, for Hezbollah. And dig this, Iraq will soon, if not already, be Shia-dominated because the United States went in and kicked out Saddam Hussein, who was an Arab Sunni who ruled with an iron fist and crushed Shias in his state, who were the majority, by the way. And so here the United States comes in and says, hey, we love democracy and freedom. Let's wipe out the Sunni leadership that controls Iraq and make it a democracy, and everything will be great. This will be great. Yay! Nobody really thought ahead on that one, because what happened and is happening right this second is that now that the Shias are in charge of Iraq, they have a natural inclination to side up with Iran and Iranian leadership. How happy is the United States about that, by the way? And who the hell is working at the State Department that didn't see that one coming? So, again, you're starting to get the sense here that, like, oh, okay, so the Iranian influence is permeating in lots of different places, and the Iranian influence couldn't penetrate Iraq before because Saddam Hussein, a dictator, would crush it. By the way, side note to self, I'm talking as I'm you. Put this down in your notes, probably a flash quiz question. It's one of the reasons why the United States used to support Saddam Hussein. It's one of the reasons why Saudi Arabia used to support Saddam Hussein. Everybody thought Saddam Hussein was hilarious because he was the Arab shield against Iranian influence. And again, Iran and Iraq are right next door neighbors. So anytime anybody thought Iran was getting too uppity or maybe their influence was permeating out, you'd have Saddam Hussein there to go crush any Shia dissent in his country and maybe throw some bombs across the border. And in fact, Saddam Hussein is the one who started the Iran-Iraq war that lasted from 1979 to 1989 with the blessing and support of the United States and the Saudis and probably most other Arab leaders. Everybody's like, yay, go get him, crazy Saddam. You go basically bloodlet your own people, throw them all in there, kill as many Iranians as you can, and hell, we're going to make money coming and going. I think the United States sold money to Iran, sold weapons to Iran, while they were also supporting Saddam Hussein in Iraq. What a catastrophe mess all that was, a 10-year just travesty, bloody war between these two countries. But perhaps now you understand why it happened and why the United States would have ever been supporting Saddam Hussein, which they did for most of his tenure. And they probably still would be supporting Saddam Hussein. Sorry, now I'm going off into speculations, and I'm not really making fun of the United States, but just contemplate this. Saddam Hussein is very likely to have still been in power to this day. Had he kept picking a fight with Iran, nobody in the Arab world or the U.S. would have had a problem with him, because all the U.S. and the Arab world hate Iran. But he did a stupid-ass thing, which is he decided after he lost the war with Iran that he'd gotten his ego pumped up too much by everybody giving him money and guns. And he decided, well, I must be the master of all the Middle East, so I'm going to turn around and invade Kuwait. Hold up! Kuwait is an Arab Sunni state. Mistake, Saddam. You could have kept picking on the Shias or picking on Iran, but you turned around and picked on one of your own kin. And so the whole Arab world turned on his ass immediately too. And the U.S. came in and said, hey, we're going to blow the shit out of you. And Saudi Arabia and everybody said, yes, you can do that now. Everybody turned their back on Saddam the second that he invaded Kuwait because he wasn't being their shield anymore. He basically was a virus who started to attack them. That's why he had to go eventually. Had he not done that, I find it hard to believe that he'd be anything but in power right now, except that maybe the Arab Spring thing would have also been happening in Iraq, but we'll never know. Anyway, dig this. Afghanistan, by the way, also has a significant Shia population. Not huge, but significant. And the Taliban, who are Sunni style, they're not Arab, but they're Sunni style, Muslims, always picked on and hated the Shias in Afghanistan. And so the reason I'm bringing that up as well is I want you to understand this. Think about how Iran has benefited from the United States' moves in foreign policy for the last decade. You want to know why Iran is gaining so much power? Well, they were doing it on their own, and they got lots of oil money to spread their love around. But I want you to dig there. Please remember this. Think about this. Why is it that Iran is such a big existential threat to everybody right now? We're also worried about Iran getting a nuclear weapon, Iran doing this, Iran doing that. They have become exceptionally empowered thanks in part to the United States. How do I mean that? Well, the United States came in and lopped off Saddam Hussein out of the leadership of Iraq, thus allowing Iran's influence to penetrate there. Then the United States invaded Afghanistan and lopped off the Taliban, another Iranian enemy. So Iran's influence can now spread, and they can help, or they can try to prop up their Shia group there. And then you start to look at places where the Arab Spring is occurring, namely like the place in Bahrain that I talked about, where the U.S. Naval Fifth Fleet is located. And when they had their Arab Spring and people came out to the street to protest, it was crushed. And these Americans said nothing. And when you start to have these things, the Iranians can now have this great successful propaganda campaign of they have the door open to them in Iraq and Afghanistan now, thanks to the United States. Never would have happened without them. But also, they can also have this great propaganda that says, see, the Americans talk about democracy and all this other nonsense. Bullshit. They didn't help anybody in Bahrain. They're not helping anybody get a democracy in Saudi Arabia. They propped up Hosni Mubarak in Egypt for 30 freaking years and didn't do nothing there to help the revolution. So what I'm trying to get at here is on the street, at the ground level, the Iranians have gained, I won't say a lot of respect, but a lot more credibility across the Middle Eastern world. And physically, their influence has been spreading in a very big way. And then you add on that they may be trying to get a nuclear weapon. And that they flout the West, that they're like, we don't care, we have no relations with the United States, we call them the Great Satan, and we hate the Europeans, and we hate all the Western imperialist capitalist stooges. And I don't think that's a very positive message, but for people like Osama bin Laden, and perhaps radicals, or just ultra-conservatives, and they're not the same. Ultra-conservative folks are not necessarily radicals. But for ultra-conservative folks and radicals and nutbags, who want to see evil in everything in the West, they think Iran is great. And I'm not just saying Persians, but there are a lot of Arabs, like Saddam Hussein, or I'm sorry, Osama bin Laden, who would say, yes, the Iranians are right. Remember, Osama bin Laden, one of his first missions was to overthrow the Saudi monarchy and make it a theocratic state. He was a religiously pious guy. That's what he wanted. He wanted U.S. soldiers and U.S. influence and Western influence out of Saudi Arabia, out of the Holy Land, and to overthrow the corrupt Saudi government, the monarchy, because who the hell put them in charge anyway, and put a theocratic religious state in charge like Iran. There are people like him out there. I don't think they're that numerous, quite frankly, but it's just a personal opinion. But they're out there. So, again, to back it up, Iranian influence has been increasing because their street cred has been increasing across the Middle East for a variety of reasons. The United States has kind of helped them also get into influencing Iraq and Afghanistan and a couple other places as well. Whew, okay, so summarize, Team Persia, Team Iran, whatever you want to call it. Team Iran totally hates the West, totally hates the United States, totally hates the West, totally hates Israel, has said that the Holocaust didn't happen and they hate Israel and they should be pushed off into the ocean, was President Ahmadinejad's own words. They also hate Team Arab. And they hate Team Arab, again, for reasons I've already talked about. They think they're corrupt Western stooges, and they're not true theocracies. They're not truly leading the best Islamic life they could be. They should become a theocratic state like Iran. All right. You know, and I should go into that for 1 second more. Can I? May I? Will you allow me this? Why do the Iranians hate the U.S. so much? Because the U.S. has never invaded Iran that they know of. Why so much hate and angst between, and now I'm just talking about the U.S. and Iran. What happened there? Something called the Iranian Revolution is what happened there. And I am going to get into just a few specifics here just so you get it. Okay? Iran used to be a monarchy just like Saudi Arabia. Concentrated power in the royal family. And that royal family, you know, they weren't that good. The Saudi royal family is actually doing a pretty decent job, which is why no one's trying to overthrow them. They spread the money and love around. The royal family into the 20th century of Iran didn't do so hot. And you might have heard of this guy called the Shah of Iran. The Shah is like, I think the translation's King of Kings. And he took over the country from his daddy. And his daddy did okay, but not great. And this guy was just kind of a clown who did worse and worse and worse, and just wanted to gain as many weapons as he could and try to squeeze as many military toys out of the United States and Western allies as he could. And he was a big buddy of the United States, him and his group. This is the Shah of Iran I'm talking about, by the way. The Shah, the leader of Iran, up to 1979, was a big ally of the United States because the United States used him as basically a pawn. We basically kept saying, hey, it's the Cold War. Just don't join the Soviets. Don't join the commies, and we'll keep supplying you with weapons and make you happy. And he was like, I like toys, okay. So, unfortunately, he was a really crappy leader, and life for the average Iranian got worse and worse and worse. And they were getting drawn into wars that Iranians were like, what the hell? Why are we being a stooge in this Cold War thing? We don't got nothing to do with this. And why do we not have jobs? And why does our government suck? And there was also this little thing. This is terrible to say. Sorry to my American friends. But Iran actually at one point in the 50s had tried democracy. They were like, okay, we're going to sideline the royal family and become some sort of constitutional monarchy. And they had an election, and they elected this guy, Mossadegh, who was wildly popular. And he was a pretty strong nationalist leader, and people loved him. And he said, well, the first things first, we're going to nationalize the oil industry so that we can make all the money off the oil instead of the Western companies. And as soon as he accidentally said that, buddy, forget it. All the Europeans and the Americans were like, what can we do to kill this dude? And long story short, they did. The United States CIA had a covert plan. I think it was called Operation Ajax. Somebody go wiki that. It was a CIA coup. And it was an inside coup where the U.S. CIA helped restore this Shah guy to power. The U.S. helped restore a monarchy and helped destroy a democracy in Iran. You've probably never heard of it. Let me assure you, every single Iranian drawing breath right now has and remembers it. And so you have already from the get-go, you have animosity from the Iranians towards the United States since the 50s. At the same time, I was saying that the United States was doing all these great things for Arab countries, or at least ideologically sticking up for them. They kind of were doing the opposite in Iran for Cold War political reasons. So, and oil reasons. I'm just going to call a spade a spade. It did have something to do with oil. The United States did not want to have all of its companies and European companies to have all their stuff nationalized and taken by the Iranian government. So they did that coup. They got the Shah back in power. He was terrible. And by 1979, this had come to a head. There were some religious leaders, namely, I'm sure you've heard of one, Ayatollah Khomeini. There he is, scary as hell. He had been thrown out of Iran for radical activities, for preaching against the government, for preaching for an Islamic State. And for, I don't know, maybe decades, I think he lived in France. He would send back recordings and send back messages and basically say, hey, we need to have a revolution. And by 1979, that's exactly what happened. Enough people were so pissed off and so unhappy, people took to the streets, and what was probably, I've seen this described before, as the largest single street protest movement in human history. Perhaps 2, 3, 5, or 10 million Iranians took to the street. I mean, this was massive. Go Google pictures of it. And the Ayatollah Khomeini got back into Iran, and then all hell started to break loose because the government tried to repress everybody and kill all the protesters, very much like what was probably getting ready to happen in Egypt during the current events of the Arab Spring. And the more the government cracked down, the more people got pissed off, the more people were convinced that they had to go. And by 1979, it did. The government was overthrown. The Shah of Iran was forced to flee. And actually, no country would even take him in, not even the United States. We're like, psych, we supported you for all these years, but we don't think so. You're not coming here. The monarchy was overthrown. And because the spiritual leader, this Ayatollah Khomeini, had been a part of it for so long and kind of the rallying force behind it, he became the natural leader of it. And initially people were debating, saying, hey, well, should we become a democracy now? There were many people who said, yes, we'll become a democracy like the Western world. But because of Khomeini's power over the masses, he said, no, I don't think so. We're going to be the first ever Islamic Republic. The Iranian Revolution of 1979 is truly the last great revolution of human history. And let me paraphrase some of my words here. Am I saying it's great because I love it and I think it's great? No, okay? I'm saying it's the last great revolution in that it's big. And it truly is a revolution. People get confused. Everybody thinks, oh, revolution is when you go throw out a political leader and somebody new comes. No, that's not a revolution. A true revolution, is when you categorically dismantle an entire structure, a way of life, and you replace it with something brand new. That's revolutionary, all right? It's not just lopping off the head of the snake and replacing it with another head. It's no. The whole snake is gone. You got another animal coming in. This is brand new. It's a new experiment. No one's ever done this before. That is what a true revolution is. And the Iranian Revolution is kind of the last great one. You say the Communist Revolution, when they threw out monarchy and implemented this whole new system. Yeah, that was a big deal. The American Revolution, it's kind of in that category. The French Revolution, now that was a real revolution. Hell, they killed everybody and replaced it with something else. So the Iranian Revolution is actually kind of the last big one of the human endeavor back in '79. However, it may go down in the history books that the Arab Spring occurring right now may be counted as the newest revolutionary phase. However, let's get back to Iran. They overthrew the monarchy, threw out the Shah, became a full-on, first ever Islamic state. That is, a government, run at the top tiers by religious folks. The Ayatollah Khomeini, of course, became the top head dude. But they did have democratic elements in the rest of it. As we've talked about in class, they have a Congress, and they elect leaders, and their president is popularly elected. They have all that, but ultimate decision-making is in the hands of a clerical religious group, period. So they're a religious state, and they call themselves such. This is not me pointing fingers and saying, no, you're a religious state, and saying, no, they are the Iranian Islamic Republic. Period. That's what it's about. And again, they're trying to export this idea to other Islamic states. They have been since 1979. Why would they do that? I don't know. Why does the United States try to get democracy pushed all over the planet Earth? Because they believe in their system. The Iranians believe in their system. During the Cold War, the commies tried to get everybody to convert to communism. That's what these systems do. So the Iranians have been, ever since, they're the first ones who ever do it, and ever since they've done it, they've said, this is the way everybody should do as we are doing. Okay, that still doesn't explain the hate. Again, maybe that troubles and scares Arab leaders. It does. It did, and it still does, that they would get their asses overthrown. Do you think the Saudi royal house wants anyone in Saudi Arabia to embrace Iranian revolutionary ideals? Don't think so. Nobody wants to have their own asses thrown out of power. But why the hate between the United States and Iran? Well, okay. First off, the Iranians from the get-go had said, and Khomeini personally said, America is to blame for all this. They're the great Satan. They're the ones who propped up the Shah. They're evil. They're terrible. They're just trying to come here to get our oil. You know what? There are probably elements of truth into some of those things. Certainly about the CIA operation to overthrow Mossadegh. And when this revolution occurred, it kind of got out of hand, as revolutions have a tendency to do. And something called the Iranian hostage crisis ensued. And that is, because it was brand new, people were like, what the hell do we do? I don't know. Let's form a government. Let's do this. Let's get some paperwork down. You had a small band of radical young men, which there were plenty of in Iran during the revolution, who went and took over the U.S. embassy. And took 52, I don't know how many initially they had, but about 52 hostages were in there long term. They probably had more than that to begin with, but 52 Americans were taken hostage. They actually went back to the Ayatollah and they were like, hey, look what we got. Cool, we got Americans because they're all evil and terrible, and what should we do with them? And actually the Ayatollah and all the people trying to put the government together were like, oh, we don't know. We're not sure what to do with this. Oh, by the way, these guys, after they took over the U.S. Embassy, actually went through all of the paperwork at the U.S. Embassy and found lots of covert CIA cables and lots of other things which infuriated them even more, which kind of further demonstrated negative U.S. influence in Iran and U.S. moves to prop up the Shah and everything else. So that just fuels the fire of hate even more. So they got these 52 American hostages. And you guys are too young to remember this. And maybe your parents probably remember it. Maybe, depending on when they were born. Yeah, your parents will remember this. This is 1979, 1981. These guys, 2 years, were on network TV, all networks, every night. The nightly news had a count of how many days it had been since these 52 Americans were taken hostage. It lasted for 444 days and was reported on daily. And this so infuriated both the U.S. government, but U.S. people. U.S. people, as is prone to happen in these situations, people were calling for the expulsion of all Iranian Americans. People were calling for war. People were calling for invasion. And some of these people were working for the U.S. government. So, I mean, so the Iranians hate the United States, and now you got 444 days of Americans despising Iran. Yeah, it was horrific. People were tying ribbons on trees. I actually remember it. I was alive and well and paying attention. So this was a huge, big deal to further isolate these two countries from each other, and more than isolate, just truly create rage and hatred, the likes of which are still around today. See, you guys are too young to know any of this, so you're just like, why does the U.S. hate Iran so much? This is why! You televised that shit for 444 days, that Americans are being blindfolded and possibly beaten by some radical religious nutbag group that no one knows shit about. And some Ayatollah who just took over this region, or took over this country. So that's why. And when they were finally released, it actually was when Ronald Reagan took office, like the day of. There was a big backroom deal with this stuff, too. And during this period is when the U.S. severed all diplomatic relations with Iran. Iran actually, in the modern state in 1979, never even established diplomatic relations with the United States. And that is another artifact that is still true to this day. We do not have a U.S. embassy in Iran. There is no Iranian embassy in the United States. Starting to get it? Starting to get the hate now? Anyway, the Iranian leadership pretty much considers the United States as the great Satan because we're pro-capitalist and because of all the history. But they also consider Israel as kind of like Dr. Evil. Because they also look at the creation of Israel as a United States experiment in adventurism in the Middle East, which the U.S. played a role. You know this already from the lecture. But it's a bit of a reach on the Iranians' part. But they say, oh, no. The Iranian leadership is convinced that Israel should not exist, that, that all the United States pretty much hates Islam and wants to kill as many Islamic people as possible. And again, this is the leadership. This is the ultra leadership. I'm not suggesting that every Iranian on the street thinks this, because I know they don't. The Iranian leadership, though, just thinks that the U.S. is the devil and they're anti-Islamic, and that the whole Israeli experiment is an experiment in punishing Islam and killing Arabs/Muslims/anybody in the Middle East so they can prop up their Western buddies, Israel. And they get some voice with that. This is another reason why the Arab states don't like Iran, why Israel in particular hates Iran, is because Iran is also very vocal about, no, see, do you want us to prove how corrupt and weak all the Arab leaders are? They are sucking up to the United States, and they have for 60 years on the Arab-Israeli dispute. Why the hell would any government of any Arab state be friends with the United States when it's the United States' fault that they propped up Israel and all these Palestinians are suffering? Really, Iran has this beautiful platform that they can stand on and make themselves look good pretty much on all of these issues. Because Iran is the only country that outright, openly, all the time says, yes, we think Israel should be destroyed. Yes, the Palestinians should all have their land back. And only if their sap-ass, corrupt Arab leaders would say the same things we say, they would have it back. See, that's why they all suck. Again, starting to see the bigger picture here of why these entities really hate each other and why the U.S. in particular really hates Iran. Okay, and Israel, of course, because Israel says Iran is an existential threat, and that's playing into current events now too, because Iran's like, yeah, we would like Israel to be wiped off the face of the map. Yeah, that's problematic for Israel. Problematic. Okay, so Iranian leadership considers Arab leaders as weak, corrupt, U.S. stooges. They consider Israel as had no right to exist. And on top of that, as if we needed more fun, they also say that their brand of government should be spread to all other Islamic states. And they say that kind of worldwide, not just in the Middle East, but of course the Middle East is their neighborhood. So that is what really infuriates and bugs Arab governments in particular. In summary, Team Persia, that is Iran. Well, we talked about them for like an hour now. They're over Iran, I'm sure you are. you're ready to run so far away from Iran. But in summary, everybody hates them. I mean, that's the quick, easy starter. U.S. hates them. Most Arab states, Arab leaders hate them. Israel hates them. Most of Team West, hate may be strong, does not like Iran and doesn't have a very good working relationship with them. In fact, most of Team West has an embargo against Iran. And to return the love, Iran hates all of those entities right back. The U.S. to them is the great Satan. Israel should be wiped off the face of the planet. Has no reason to exist. All Arab leaders are corrupt stooges. Take your pick. This is a hate-hate relationship by virtually everybody in the region and in the wider world, with an exception. Maybe a couple. The Turks. I'm going to get to Team Turk in just a little bit, but the Turks don't have a great problem with Iran and actually have working relations with them, which is one of the strengths of Turkey's position in the whole region. Again, I'm getting ahead of the game on that one. But also Russia and China. I'll save this for the end as well, but Russia and China are, of course, UN Permanent Security Council members and can stop any major moves against Iran, which they kind of have. Not hugely, but they've never allowed the United Nations to go forward and do anything really huge against Iran. And that's because China gets a lot of oil from them, invests a lot in the Iranian economy. And Russia actually is kind of their, big brother's too strong of a term, but has helped them out during the Cold War. Is helping them build their nuclear industry. There's a lot of Russian companies there, a lot of Russian investment. So it is important to point out that not all of planet Earth hates Iran, even though former President George Bush put them on the axis of evil. Evil! Remember that? Was it Iran, Iraq, and North Korea, the axis of evil? But that's not the whole world, but it's a lot of them. And mostly for our talk about this region, most of Iran's neighborhood does not take too kindly to them. And again, when I'm talking about hate, and these guys hate these guys, and everybody hates Iran, I'm mostly talking, if not exclusively talking about the Iranian leadership, the Iranian government. Iran is a very big country, big population, long, proud history, a very illiterate people. And by that I mean their standards of living aren't bad and their education levels are high. These are smart folks with, again, a rich, proud tradition and history that's distinct from everybody else in the Middle East. And this is not something they've forgotten. And most of those folks are awesome. Right? When I'm talking about people hating Iran, I'm talking about the leadership, the Ayatollah and that clerical group at the top, but also rabid conservative nutbags like current president of Iran, Mahmoud Ahmadinejad. I mean, these guys spout hate, and I'm not saying that because I personally hate them, but that's kind of what they do. I mean, they're very confrontational. They make fun of everybody. I mean, when you're going to call the United States and everybody in Team West as the great Satan, that's confrontational. That's hate speech. When you say that the Holocaust didn't happen and that Israel should be pushed in the Mediterranean Sea, that's kind of hate speech. Very confrontational, very irritating, very frictional. The Iranian leadership, that's kind of what I'm talking about. That is the entity that people hate. Unfortunately, the Iranian leadership are in charge of the state. Now, we've already talked about how this group has increasing influence in the region through their proxies. All right, so Iranian power is on the up and up. It is growing. Their probably public opinion polls about them throughout most of the Middle East have been getting slightly higher over the course of the last decade or two. Although with the Arab Spring, I don't know, that might be getting tempered. We don't know. We don't know if Egypt, let's say, is going to follow the Turkish model and go for democracy or follow the Iranian model and go for theocracy. We don't really know how much influence Iran has to the big players in the rest of the region. But they certainly, we're debating about it, which means they have at least some play in there. And that's, again, what has a lot of folks worried. Now, to finish off about Iran's kind of summary, they have this nuclear obsession as well that we should probably at least allude to, because this is a game changer. Before they got all hot and heavy about getting a nuclear weapon, people could hate them, you could spout, and we had no diplomatic relations, and this, blah, 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 that, and everybody calls each other names. But it's gotten really serious now with their nuclear obsession. And it does appear, and I'm not trying to, encourage rumors and just pick up tidbits here and state them as fact. But it's starting to truly look like, yes, they really are trying to get a nuclear weapon. The United States government has been saying this for years. And for years, there's not been a whole lot of proof, and so most people have been, who are sensible, who read, who go out of their way to try to learn all the facts, have said, you know, United States, we know you hate them. You've hated them for 30 years. You said the same thing about Iraq right next door. You said they had weapons of mass destruction. Nobody's buying this in the U.S. Come on. People are starting to buy it in a very big way. I'm going to go ahead and throw in my personal opinion. Yeah, I kind of buy it too. Not because the United States government says Iran's trying to get a nuclear weapon, but because the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency, who's in charge of inspections, just last week released a report that says, yes, we think they're trying to get nuclear weapons. That's enough for me. That is enough for me. On top of that, and I won't get into it here, ask me one-on-one if you want more detail. The Iranians have done all sorts of bizarre things in just the last couple of years under Mahmoud Ahmadinejad's leadership, that they're just putting it in everybody's face. If you know anything about the science of nuclear energy, they've done several things which they didn't need to do, which don't have to be done to create nuclear energy. So the Iranian stance they're trying to stick by, which they've been saying for years, which is we only want nuclear energy, we're not trying to get a nuclear weapon, the West just hates us, the U.S. just hates us, everybody just hates us. It's like, that's all fine and dandy, and it's probably true. But you keep doing stuff which has been factually reported and you yourself are bragging about, which is making it look definitely like you're trying to get a nuclear weapon, including some secret underground bases which the IAEA didn't know about until very recently. And just the enrichment levels that they're trying to get plutonium to, that they don't need to be at that high levels. It's a whole bunch of stuff. They have this obsession, this fixation with getting a nuclear weapon. Or at least the perception that they have a nuclear weapon. And that's a game changer because, of course, Israel's terrified of that prospect because Israel's afraid they're going to use the weapon against them. Most Arab countries are just as terrified about the prospects of an Iran that has a nuclear weapon when no one else in the neighborhood does, which then, of course, gives Iran way more leverage and way more power to have way more influence, be way more bossy than they already are. See how that works? Everybody has reason to worry here. It's not just Israel. It's not just the United States. By the way, that's preposterous. And whether they had 1 or 100 nuclear weapons, none of them are going to be targeted at the United States. They would be in the neighborhood. It's the neighborhood that's very worried. And speaking of worry, I didn't want to finish this Iran rant without sticking up for them at least just this little bit, which is not like me. But I actually empathize, not that sympathize. I empathize, and I want you to empathize as well. Empathize means you understand their viewpoint. You don't necessarily agree with them, but you understand where they're coming from. And I empathize with the Iranian leadership because, you know what? They have reason to worry. And this is not me being threatening. Yeah, in your face. No. They have a lot of reason to be as worried as they are. And they have, I think, every reason in the world to want a nuclear weapon. I know, that sounds blasphemous for me as a United States person, or any, hell, even if I'm from an Arab country or from Israel, to suggest that they have reason to have to get a nuclear weapon. I don't want them to get a nuclear weapon personally. Nobody on planet Earth wants them to, except them. But I empathize. I understand why they would want one. What do I mean? Look at a couple of maps here I'm going to show you. One is a map from the original invasion, the first Gulf War, about the time of the first Gulf War when the United States went in with other international forces to stop Saddam Hussein. And look at the troop numbers in and around, all around the map around Iran. Look at the little boats floating out in the Arabian Sea. Some of them, of course, patrolling the Persian Gulf. Look at all the troops stationed in Saudi Arabia and Kuwait. And now look at a later map where now the United States is in Afghanistan. Yeah, and there's troops there too. Oh, by the way, there's U.S. troops and U.S. bases in Turkey, a NATO ally. They're going to increase the troop number in Kuwait. The United States Navy's 5th Fleet is centered in Bahrain. Oh, here's the updated map. Yeah, look at all these ships. Let's look at a ship map of all of the battleships and aircraft carriers in the Arabian Sea, which patrol in the Persian Gulf. And finally, look at this last map. This is just a kind of summarization of all U.S. bases, just U.S. bases that have U.S. troops and U.S. artillery and U.S. missiles. Look at it. Just look at that. Iran is completely surrounded. Again, do I want them to get a nuclear weapon? No, I think it'd be probably the worst thing ever for the Middle East and probably planet Earth. Do I understand why they might want one? Yes, I understand. There are thousands and thousands and tens of thousands of U.S. troops surrounding this country. Not that it's intentional. It's not. It's for other reasons, which you know, other missions. There are hundreds, if not tens of thousands of missiles all around the dozens and dozens of bases all around Iran. And there's a dozen or 2 dozen battleships, not just from the U.S., but from other places, hanging out in the Persian Gulf and the Arabian Sea. I would be worried if my job as the leader of Iran is to keep Iran in one piece. I would be concerned about all of the military buildup around me, specifically because not only does the U.S. hate my guts, which we've made that clear, but even if all the U.S. bases and all the U.S. troops left, all the Arab neighbors all hate my guts. And you now know that Saudi Arabia is arming itself to the teeth. Again, are you starting to get the bigger picture here? This is one of the reasons why the U.S. and no one on planet Earth wants Iran to get a nuclear weapon, even though I understand why they'd want it, because again, it's a deterrent. That's what a nuclear weapon is. A lot of people are like, oh, Iran's crazy, and they're crazy, they'll get a nuclear weapon and they'll nuke Israel. And it's like, well, okay, they could, yes, they could do that, which would ensure that the United States and all of the Western allies would bomb them into oblivion and basically suicide. Do I personally think that Iran wants to commit suicide and kill all of its own people to make a political statement about blowing up Israel? I don't think so. I don't think so. Could the Ayatollah be crazy enough to do it? I don't know the guy personally, but I just don't think so. Sorry, that might be anti-U.S. or anti-Israel or anti-something, but I think these folks want a nuclear weapon for the deterrent part. That if they get a nuclear weapon, then nobody will invade them. Nobody will bomb them because they can play that nuclear card. That's the power of a nuclear weapon. Not that you're going to use it, because once you use it, it's game over for everybody. If you just have it with the threat that you'll use it, that's very powerful. Especially with all of the talk and all of the hatred that's aimed towards Iran right now in the modern day, here in the 21st century. I mean, good Lord. They're just, again, surrounded by troops from all walks of planet Earth now, mostly the United States, and the Arabs are arming, and they don't got a whole lot of friends in the hood. It's an awfully, awfully, awfully nice insurance policy that you won't get invaded if you have a nuclear weapon. Because, of course, Israel has already suggested they might bomb Iran's nuclear facilities. The United States is all up in the Iranian hizzle, in the hood, talking smack about them, which they have for 30 years. I might want one. I'm just saying. And, of course, this plays into current, like right this second current events. With the United Nations report to be released this week, will provide evidence of Iran's nuclear weapons push. This is through the IAEA that has come out and said, and I respect the IAEA and their reports. And they have said, yes, we think something extremely fishy is going on here. And this is really starting to crystallize things. It's bringing things to a head. And let me finish with this. Why are we in the United States and pretty much everybody else really, and this is probably a test question, really not wanting Iran to get a nuclear weapon? Is it just because, oh my gosh, we just, it's all about saving Israel? Well, maybe it is for some politicians. But most people on planet Earth really don't want Iran to get a nuclear weapon, because if they get one, it will almost 100% assure that there will be a nuclear arms race in the Middle East. Because if they get one, we're pretty sure Israel already has them. They might make theirs publicly known and say, hey, actually, yeah, we've got 40, 50, or 150 nuclear weapons. It's certainly going to compel Saudi Arabia to get them. And who the hell else knows who will want to jump into this? Maybe Egypt and say, hey, we don't trust anybody that's going on, anybody in this neighborhood either. So we want nuclear weapons. If they got nuclear weapons, they got... You see where this is going to go. It's like a brand new Cold War, but just in the Middle East. Except in the Cold War, those two big powers on either sides of the planet in the Middle Eastern Cold War, nuclear weapon buildup Cold War, be everybody right beside each other with a bunch of radicals thrown in just for fun. That can't end well for anyone. And that's what everyone's really worried about. That's it for Team Iran, though. Whew, sorry, that one went way long, but it is a serious issue of our times, and I did want you to understand it, in as much depth as you can take sitting through this video.